Here's a statistic that should frighten every CIO. 73% face relentless pressure to demonstrate measurable business results, but only 23% of them have the tools to actually prove it. Meanwhile, the average enterprise runs about 254 different softwares, and about 68% of those are operating in isolation. So we've created this digital ecosystem where systems can't communicate, business needs get lost in translation, and IT leaders are being judged on the impact that they truly can't measure. This is where Ashley Kanok comes in. As CIO at Logic Monitor and former IT leader at GE, Dell, and Encora, Ashley has spent the last 20 years not just observing this disconnect, but solving it, fundamentally transforming how IT and business teams work together. Where most IT leaders get trapped in the technical details, Ashley saw the real issue. Digital transformation wasn't about failing because of bad technology. It was failing because organizations were built on systems that couldn't talk to each other, couldn't translate business needs into results. Her approach is different. She doesn't just implement technology, she rebuilds the entire partnership between IT and the business. The numbers here are pretty concrete. Companies with strong IT business alignment are 2.4 times more likely to exceed revenue goals, yet only 32% achieve it. Ashley's been in both camps. She's seen IT treated like a help desk, and she's built IT organizations to directly drive growth. We can't wait to talk to Ashley about all things IT leadership, IT transformation, AI, and really her thoughts on what makes a great IT leader. So let's get going.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Welcome, Ashley, to the podcast. How you doing?
Thank you. I'm doing well. Thank you.
Yeah,
We are super happy to have you.
yeah. It is exciting. I mean, not that we don't talk all the time, but
Y'all talk all the time. I don't get to, so this is fun.
you get the pleasure and the absorption of her knowledge today.
Exactly.
So we're going to talk about a lot of things today. Of course, your history in IT, stretching back the last couple of decades, you've seen a lot of transformation and a lot of changes within IT. And we really want to kind of uncover not only what you've seen leading up to this moment in time, and then we want to kind of talk about AI and where you think AI is going, of course, because that's what everybody talks about now. But I kind of want to start by talking about the perception of IT. So over the years, IT has, years ago been treated like a back office, support, infrastructure, things that maybe weren't sexy. And then it's kind of migrated into what we think of as business value or value creation. Talk to us a little bit about how you've seen that journey over your career and what you've witnessed and where you think that's going.
Well, I mean, I would tell you the biggest gap, as you kind of alluded to, is the tension between the business and IT. Executives often view IT through a business outcome lens. So deliver more value faster, cheaper, smarter, right? While IT, we operate within constraints lens. So we have to maintain stability, we need compliance, we need security. Again, it creates a natural tension. Business leaders think we're too slow. IT leaders think that, executives unrealistic about complexity and risk.
But
So-
who's right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because they're both right in some lenses, right? And I think that's part of the evolution. I think
It is.
with a lot of the projects that we see now, like it is, okay, what's that business case? Okay, great. You want that shiny new object? Okay, let's put it into business terms and meet before we even get into the project.
Yeah. And I mean, I think it's just a shift in how the two operate. So, IT needs to shift away from being order takers and sitting back and be a strategic thinker, a strategic partner, build the trust and allow for self-service. I'm a big fan of that because I actually do think that's a really good way for you to build trust with your business. And then you need to have shared metrics. Everybody needs to have skin in the game, right? And so, I think that's a really hard concept because oftentimes they're like, oh, that's just an IT thing or that's just a business thing, but it's actually not. So that helps a
So
lot.
true. So true.
How do you change that perception though? Because I mean, we see it all the time, right? We witness this stuff, whether it's been sitting, in the business side of the house and the IT side of the house, or kind of in between where you're in an operations or strategy role, which we've kind of all played that role at one point or the other. Um, how do you bridge that divide? How do you really get people working together? Because there's, to me, you called it out. It's the natural tension and the silos, which I drives me insane. How do you really break that? How do you create almost a different relationship between business and IT, or not even business and IT and kind of the rest of the company, right?
Yeah. I think it starts with one, building trust, do what you say you're going to do, deliver what you say you're going to deliver. I think two is really starting to strengthen that partnership, and that's really somewhat the onus is on IT to come in and say, here's what I can do for you. Have
Mm,
you thought about this? And being a seat at the table and helping them realize what actually can be, the art of impossible, which they're not thinking about. And so I think, it's really coming to them to say, what can I do for you? And, the
right,
value that I can bring. I think oftentimes that part gets lost in terms of the value that IT can actually bring to business, right? Because oftentimes are sitting around just waiting for them to say, "Oh, I need this new widget. Oh, I need a field
right.
in Salesforce," or what have you.
Right. And do you feel like that's a conversation that senior leadership is interested in having? I mean, I get the sense it's company to company and
It's a culture thing, right? I mean, there's some cultures that value IT and there's a really good, relationship. And then there's other cultures where IT is the redheaded stepchild. All right. And so, it just kind of depends on the culture. And I think, if you've got strong enough leaders where, that becomes a focus. And from a CIO perspective, I want that relationship and I want to change that perception. So I'm actively trying to figure out how do I have those conversations. But you have to have people that wanna actually bridge that gap.
Yeah. If you're a CIO, it's a new frontier. You've got to prove yourself. You've got to build that relationship. I'm wondering, you've lived this transition and this evolution, right? For people who haven't lived it, what kind of skills, soft skills and technical skills do you really recommend to help bridge that conversation? Because it's a different skill set, I think, than it was 10, 20 years ago.
Here's what I would say, on the IT side, people have to stop thinking that IT has to be the gatekeeper of all technology. Release some control, right? It's a hard thing to do if you've been in an IT for 20 years because that's the way it's always been, right? So it's starting to think about, okay, I'm not gonna be the gatekeeper. I'm gonna be the strategist. I'm gonna be an innovative leader. I'm going to drive, AI, so we can experience growth and trust. I mean, it's really trying to break away from, how we've always done it. And it's just a hard thing to do. I mean, I think the first,
That's a huge shift.
yeah, it is. It is. Uh, when I first started thinking about self service, and this was back in the Dell days when I was running the warehouse, it was really scary because I was so used to controlling everything. And I was like, you just had to say, look, if I want to stay relevant in this industry, I've got to be okay with taking, a big swing, relinquishing some control, doing things different. If you just keep doing the same thing over and over again, you're not going to be relevant in IT.
How did your team react to that? Because that's a huge culture shift, not only as an individual leader, but also for the team who is used to do it this way and we keep it on the rails and we don't trust you.
Yeah.
right,
I
right.
hated it first and they thought I was insane.
Interesting.
Yes, but what was so fascinating to watch, I mean, we put guardrails around what they could and couldn't do, what have you, but was really fascinating to watch, and this is a true story. The business partner at the time that I first did this with, like, could not stand IT, hate IT, told us once that they would not pull us out of a burning building. Just,
Ouch.
Nice.
I know, yeah. I mean, it hurt a little bit. When we started to talk about this concept and use them as a POC, and it was very, very successful, all of a sudden I'm like, I was the prom queen, right? I mean, I went
Right.
from you're not gonna pull, you let me burn to, I want to talk to you every single day. So it really shifted that working relationship because we gave them the control, some of the control that they wanted. They felt empowered. They didn't feel like IT was always a bottleneck, but we still had the controls in place to make sure that couldn't do something that was going to impact the integrity of the system, et cetera.
But putting that, so governance, I love governance. Everybody thinks it's a dirty word, but I like it because I think it calls out what you said. It puts in guardrails. It puts in natural organizational boundaries to ensure that the people who don't really have the technical chops but might think they do because they watched a YouTube video or ChatGPT did, don't go in and mess up your system. So things like admin access and stuff like that should be limited versus, to your point, being the gatekeeper of all those things and essentially look like or become a bottleneck. So when you think about that governance and you think about that structure, how hard is it given the variety of applications that sometimes IT has to deal with to have a governance model that actually does what you say it's doing in self-service? Because wouldn't it almost be application by application dictation in some
Yeah.
instances?
Yeah. Yeah. You're right. And so I would say if you want to start to look at self-service, and as we talked about, the democratization of IT is, yeah, I think you start with an application, see how it goes, right? And just fine tune it along the way. Then you add the next one and see how that goes because your governance may be different depending on the application, like I said.
Do, do you feel like there are natural things? So we'll take reporting, right? As setting up users, right? That seems to be like low hanging fruit, which is, hey, I just onboarded a new person. I don't need to wait to IT to give them access to 72 systems. Like, this
Yeah.
is silly.
S Self-service BI is probably the predominant use case for it.
Mm.
We just did it in, here at a Logic Monitor. That was one of the things that I implemented as part of Dell in the warehouse was self-service BI, among other things. But so that's very common and very popular. And it's a great thing to do because to me, I wanted to get out of the report writing business, right? That's I did not want to do that. And so, we pushed that off into the business so that they could build whatever report they wanted to build. Right now, there's the desire we have a business partner that really wants to get their hands on Salesforce. And so we're actually trying to figure out what are those things that we can enable them to go do. So again, we, keep the integrity of the system. They can't impact everybody else or what have you, but they still feel like, hey, I can do some things on my own and I'm not having to go log a JIRA ticket and wait for you to respond.
Yep. And we talked about this last week with Ryan, and he brought up an interesting point around business continuity. And it's probably one of the areas that he feels people are moving away from, that they're not as robust in it in terms of the technology is getting so good that people are less concerned that the system's going to go down. But when it does go down, people are becoming less and less prepared. And
Right.
so part of that really, isn't it the fact that ultimately you as the CIO are responsible for that business continuity? So giving up self-service, I think it goes back to the beginning of the conversation of, them thinking you're a bottleneck versus you as protector of data,
You're still the first
security.
person they call when things go wrong.
Right.
I mean, that's why it's such a careful balance because, yeah, our job is to protect the company, right?
Mm,
And so it's one of those things which is why I haven't just thrown stuff over the fence. I mean, we're putting a lot of effort and due diligence into it to say, okay, if we let them do this, what's the worst case scenario? What if, right? And how do we protect it? So if they do make a mistake and something happens, what are we going to do, right? And so we're working on trying to figure out all the different angles of what could happen, and then what's the plan if it does.
right. Right. And I think that's, going back to that natural tension is, do you believe that people see the role of the CIO or as IT as that gatekeeper, as that protector? Do they really understand that? I mean, maybe the CEO does, right? And maybe the CFO because financial risk. But do you think most people understand that part of the role and respect
Yeah.
that part of the role? Yeah.
Yeah.
What I was thinking too.
No, because I mean, I think at the end of the day, all they're interested in is what can you do for me? Which
Right.
is natural, right? Everybody's oh, right. So they're not thinking through, well, what I'm asking for, could be very damaging or what have you. And, why can't they just give it to me now? Because I want it. That's all they're focused on. And there's no
Yeah.
focus on you're not the only business partner we have.
Right.
So there's always that balance around, hey, I got to service everybody. How do I prioritize? How do I make sure everybody's getting what they want? Right. Because everybody's thing is more important than the others.
Yeah.
I'm curious about that. We talked early on about, having that leadership or that culture that really values IT. IT is called on to do a lot of things for a lot of different departments. What are the characteristics that you really appreciate in companies that do drive that prioritization in terms of helping you to balance all of the demand on your team and your time?
So I would two things. One, oftentimes we don't want to invest in IT, right? And so we're hobbling around with things not being upgraded and what have you. So that investment to make sure your environment's healthy and what have you. I think too, if you can get to a point where you're measuring everything in a business outcome ROI versus I just want it, that is going to help you prioritize, right? We're going through that right now with a lot of this AI initiatives, and we're actively saying you have to attach the ROI because we've got to go figure out what is the most valuable thing that we should go work on and not waste our own time on something that no value.
Absolutely. And I
It's
think with
hard.
some of the Yeah, with some of those AI initiatives too, it's like, oh, this is great. This is gonna speed us up. But one of the things that I've seen is, and Rich, you and I have talked about this, is okay, measure current state, and then all of a sudden, people are like, oh, oh yeah, okay,
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think listen, we've all been around this environment long enough to know that business outcomes are usually something that's talked about but never truly adhered to. So we talk about ROI, and if you think about the evolution of IT, and we talk about this is SaaS kind of changed traditional IT development, right? Made it quote unquote simpler, and AI is doing that even more. But if you think of the large SaaS projects, it was these monolithic programs that was encompassing all these go to market activities. And the assumption was salespeople are going to sell better. They're going to sell faster. They're going to have access to more information. And a lot of those did not prove that ROI. But once the implementation was done, nobody asked for it.
Yeah.
And
Benefits really.
I think that the evolution has continued on that they're asking for it.
yeah,
Leadership is now asking.
yeah. Well, because I think it's, multi-millions of dollars that are going out the door.
100.
And I think the promise of SaaS was, oh, you're going to get there so much quicker, right? I think that's true now of AI. I think AI is like doing it even faster. But I think the reality is people are still not understanding what good ROI looks like.
Yeah. So, I mean, those are some of the things that we're kind of dealing with in terms of helping them think through what ROI actually is. It's not, I can do things a little bit faster. That's not it. Is it revenue generating? You know what I mean? Is there cost out and that kind of thing? And so, one of
Yeah.
the things that I do actually think Logic Monitor is trying to do is have a heavy focus on. We only really want to work on those things that do have is revenue generating and cost out. And oh, by the way, I'm going to have you sign up for those benefits. You got to
Mm,
put your name on it. And if you said I can take two heads out, you're taking two heads out next year. So I do actually think they're doing a better job. I think that than they have in the past. We'll see how it all goes, but that's kind
right.
of the position that the CFO in particular has been taking.
When we talk about the bridge from, or the journey, I guess, from the old IT to the new IT, the value driving IT. I'm wondering, in your mind, given that you've actually done this multiple times, and now at Logic Monitor, you're driving modernization for a tool that, oh yeah, they help other clients do modern things to monitor their digital ecosystems. I'm wondering, what does a successful transformation actually look like? We talk about the ROI, but what are the other things that you look for, or that you would say, yeah, that was a really successful digital full transformation?
So I would say one, make sure you have your success metrics established up front, so you know what you're marching towards, right? And the entire way, you should gut check: Am I actually going to meet that metric? Right? I think adoption and enablement is huge. I think oftentimes there's not enough emphasis placed on how hard a big, large transformational program is and how it changes the business and you got to be ready for it. And most people just discount that. And then it is just a disaster because you've interrupted the business, right? So everybody's scrambling for months trying to figure it out, not understanding that their business process has changed. I got a new tool that I have to learn, and that kind of thing. I think that's the hardest part, really. The technology isn't the hardest part. I mean, it is, but really it's rolling it out and the enablement of
The
it.
change within the business. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's interesting because a lot of the times that request for change comes from them. And you're really just executing that vision in some instances, right? So if we talk about, a lot of the AI stuff, or you talk about, Salesforce back in the day, oh, yeah, we got to have Salesforce and, it's going to change the way we sell. A lot of that came from sales leaders, not from IT necessarily.
True. Yes, but I think the key to that is, do they know what problem they're trying to solve when they're asking for it, right? Because I have found that's the number one problem when we get requests. They don't know. Most people do not understand why they're asking us for what they're asking us for.
Yeah.
Know what problem they're trying to solve.
How do you coach them to, I mean, let's be
That's the
real. We
first
can all say you have no idea what you're talking about.
the first question out of my mouth is, what problem are you trying to solve? And if they can't tell me what problem they're trying to solve, I'll talk to you when you can tell me when you have a problem that we can solve. I mean, that's the bottom line. I mean, I can help them think through and figure it out, but I mean, we're not going to go waste a bunch of time on something that may not.
Treating symptoms.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel the same way about a lot of these AI tools that we get requests for, and they're shiny and they're cool looking, but okay, what are you doing with it? Right? Just because it looks cool. And so I think it always starts with, what problem are you trying to solve?
Yeah, because it's always a business change, to your point, right? It's not, listen, IT wants a more simplified, streamlined environment. Obviously, you guys don't want to support 800 systems that don't talk to each other, that are a jumbled mess, that are consuming your data, that you're concerned about security or data breaches. But at the end of kind of all of this is this transformation that the company is trying to undertake, right? And they're trying to imagine a different way to sell, market, support, whatever kind of pivot or organization is trying to make that change. And so when you think about that, does it come to, what problem are you trying to solve, ever become bigger than that problem? And you're like, you're not focused on this, right? Like, how, I guess the question really here is, how much do you play a role in helping them really achieve that transformation through helping them think through that problem? Does that make sense?
So
Just a rambling question.
I actually think that starts with the business case and being able to support, this is what we need and this is the problem I have. And here, if we do this, how it is going to solve it, right? So if you can't get through a business case, then you probably haven't thought through why
Hmm.
and what you need.
How much pressure do you have for, we need to AI everything because AI is everything and we will start losing market share. We will start, you know, losing, all over. The sky is falling because we are not investing in AI. How do you balance? Yeah, I hear you, but we still need the business case. Are you getting pressure like that and how have you handled it?
So the answer is yes. I'm getting a lot of pressure about AI, and I talk about it all day long, every day. It's it's constant. But I think one of the things that I have tried to do is say, look, AI is actually meant to amplify and optimize human potential, right? It is not. It should be seen as a partner. It should not be seen as I'm going to plug this thing in. Everything's going to be great, and now I can take some heads out, because I don't. We're not there yet, right? And so, I think oftentimes there's false expectations as to what AI is actually going to give you. I think the other thing is that there's this notion of, I plug it in and everything's great, but nobody thinks about the business process or anything like that. I mean, I think, oftentimes we're going to build a spaceship, but we forget ground control. And ground control is support, infrastructure, process, and governance. And so I think that's the problem, is we enamored by a tool that we're not thinking through, how does it actually fit into my business and how does it actually support my business process?
That's a great way of looking at it with the ground control. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, so much of AI seems obviously we've never seen technology evolve this quickly. I mean, it is crazy what these tools are doing. As you think through the business case and the business problem to be solved,
Hmm.
do you feel, because this is what I think that it requires even more business participation, even more thoughtfulness around how the business works and connects than ever in a technology solution.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think especially if your one of your goals is actually cost out and reduction in heads, you really need to understand what your business process is and how it's actually going to support it. Because otherwise, if you don't, and then you just start getting rid of a bunch of people, then you find out you can't actually run your business, right?
Right. Right.
So, I think going in with this whole, again, plug it in, don't have to worry about the business process we don't need to change. It's just a terrible way to look at it.
You said something that I really appreciate along the lines of IT needs to know business processes better than the business knows the business processes. And I think that is so fundamental to really understanding what are we building and why are we building it, guys. And I think it's so helpful to have an IT partner who takes that point of view because it underpins what the business is trying to do and it shows really that foundation that is built on the blood, sweat, and tears of IT really understanding how do I enable you as a business.
Yeah, I mean, and you're never going to be that strategic partner that they need if you don't understand their business. You're going to be an order taker, and you're going to be an order taker who doesn't know what they're taking, and you're just going to, you know, you can make the change and it has a downstream impact, right? And so if you don't know that or don't understand how, what the full life cycle or the end-to-end process is, you could potentially break another part of the business.
Do you find in your teams that they have that same attitude? Or is that something that you build as you build your own culture at the companies that you are working for?
No, I have found that is something that I have to come in and reinforce as an expectation that we
Mhm.
spend time with our business partners. We need to understand their business processes. Need to understand how they do business so that we can better support them and better enable them and save them from themselves, right? What you're asking for, you don't want to do that, right? And so you can't provide that type of service and feedback if you don't actually understand it.
Which is also why Ashley is known for running really, really good teams.
The there's so much coming out around AI, obviously, as it matures, and companies are now jumping into it. And statistics like um, 87% or 78%. That was the study from, I don't know, Gartner, Forrester, one of these guys, that most of it's experimentation. That people really aren't moving into that operational part of AI yet. And the fact that they're doing that, they're not really seeing that return on investment. So when you guys think about your strategy around AI and how you're going to go towards it, you talked a little bit about how people like, hey, here's this new shiny tool and I want this tool. And you have all the big LLMs, and then you have Salesforce with Agentforce, and Workday with their agents and all this stuff. How do you look at it from an architectural perspective that looks at longevity versus short term gain? And the third thing I'll add is then actually achieving that ROI.
So I'm going to answer it a different way. So here's what I would say is I think with technology changing as fast as it is, you're going to constantly be ripping things out and replacing it. You just are.
Mhm.
So you have to have an architecture that's flexible enough for you to be able to do that, right? So the way you do that is have more of a component modular architecture versus this big monolithic, thing. And so I think if you can go, what I told somebody yesterday was we were talking about the architecture, and I told him everything that you build and everything that you think of when we talk about our architecture, you go in with the mindset that it's coming out in 6 months
Mm.
because that's the way it's going to happen, and we have to build for that, and we have to be able to move quickly, and if something new comes in and it's better and we want to leverage it, rip it out and put this thing in or make changes to the stuff that we're building.
But what do you think is the foundation that wouldn't change? Because you always have to build that upon a foundation, right? So obviously we know data is critical, right? You have to have a good data, good content, clean content. What do you think in an architecture is the things that you can't rip out? Like if you don't if you're not building upon a
Yeah.
strong
If you don't get it
foundation,
right,
yeah,
right.
then the walls fall apart, right? Like you're building a house and the foundation is rocky. And if you're replacing it every 6 months,
Well, I mean, data is the thing that you're not going to replace every 6 months, right? It's the thing that all of your systems, even whether it's AI or not, is reliant on, right? And if your data is not good, it's garbage in, garbage out. You're never going to get what you need out of that system ever. So to me, data is foundational, right? I think you have to have a good integration layer as well, right? So how are we stitching all this stuff together? So I mean, I think those are the two most critical things that we've got.
do you have a perspective on buy versus build?
Yes, it's probably not a popular one, but I do.
Do you want to share it with us?
I do not personally, I do not want a bunch of point solutions all over the place. That's going to be a nightmare. Data's going everywhere, nothing matches, what have you. I would prefer to build. Now, there are probably some exceptions to where it does actually make sense to buy something, right? And that's okay. But I don't want to get myself into a situation where I've just got all this stuff that's just piled on and we have no way to really integrate it, keep track of, the data and have the confidence, right?
Right.
What you're getting out of one system is gonna say the same thing out of this one.
But don't you feel like the technology now allows you to build faster, quicker, better than
Yes.
some of these point solutions? I mean, the way I think about these point solutions, and I'll pick on Salesforce, um, is it was built on the SaaS platform, and now it's AI. So there are these tools that are native AI, which will evolve quicker.
Yeah.
When you're building some of these point solutions like Oracle, Salesforce, Workday, things that run most businesses, right? Like, let's not be shy about that. These things are integral to the operations and running of most businesses, and they're just bolting AI on. And I'm not saying it's sloppy, but it certainly isn't AI first, right? They couldn't build an AI CRM from the ground up in 3 months. Maybe they could, but they'd need the giant LLMs potentially to do that, and the cost would be prohibitive.
So I think that because AI is just, on fire right now, everybody's talking about it. It was a rush to get something out there so they can be competitive,
Mm,
right? And so I feel like your big companies like your Salesforce and what have you, they got something out there so that they could say it's AI. But there's smaller companies that do a much better job than what they're doing. I'm sure they'll advance it and it'll be okay.
right,
But personally, we're not necessarily leveraging it. So we went and, built our own multi-agent architecture. It took time. It took a couple of months. So you have an upfront investment to put the right things in place, but you put it in place so you can go faster,
right.
right?
And so that multi-agent architecture is part of your foundational.
Yep.
Yeah.
That is how we're going to get to the point where we're actually really can move the needle for our business, right? So we have the architecture in place. Now the missing pieces, let's go find those right use cases that is going to move the needle, not just hey, again, hey, now I don't have to do this one task, right? It's, things like, taking a lot of tasks and effort off of salespeople so they can sell. And I think I've said this before, like my utopia for the sales organization is they never have to log into Salesforce ever again. So, we've got agents that can go do it for them.
I think you just want a lot of sales friends by that.
So yeah.
So then that's talking more to the human in the loop, human out of the loop. So this is, I mean, it's a big discussion around AI, right?
Yeah, and I mean, I don't think we are certainly not there yet where there's humans completely out of the loop.
Mm,
So, for instance, what I was just talking about in terms of let's take the sales organization and we built, agent that can go and build a quote for you. You would still want to see it and make sure it's right before you hit, send, so to speak, right? And
yeah.
so I don't think we're quite there yet in terms of having full confidence that it could do, just do everything that you want it to do without you having to approve it or review it or look at it, what have you.
Yeah. I think it's obviously an ongoing fear. And we've talked about this a couple of times. There was a Sam Altman interview, and he said, interviewer asked, "Hey, AI is going to take all the jobs, and what do you think of that?" And he said, "Well," and I think you'd agree with this, with support, 100%. Customer support is ripe for AI. That's a self-service thing, right? That things in the medical field, he said, are probably less likely because people still want that relationship. When you have a medical issue, you want to talk to a person, not a computer. And then where he was less unsure was software engineers. And it's something we talked with Ryan last week on the podcast, which was, and his take was that senior and software engineers will always be needed because they actually understand how, as you talked about earlier, is to know when to call bullshit on the code. Whereas junior engineers don't have that time and seat. So I think it's harder for junior engineers to get that experience.
Yeah, I mean, here's what I would say. Yes, you're right. I mean, you have to be able to audit, right? You have to be able to refactor intelligently. You have to be able to communicate intent, right? So foundation coding still matters, right? So even though, yes, the folks that are coming out of university right now that don't necessarily take traditional development courses or coding courses, I think companies are going to have to understand that and realize you got to balance between the two. So how can you also, it's almost like you have reverse mentoring where you've got your more seasoned developers that are kind of teaching the younger people, like, here's the foundational things you need to be able to go look for, right? How do you verify correctness, right? How do components interact? How small code changes ripple through your complex systems. Conversely, you got, the folks that are coming in that, they're all in low code, no code, AI, this, and they're kind of training up, right? And so it's like this, joint mentorship, so to speak.
Yeah.
That's an interesting take on it because you're exactly right. I mean, it's kind of like, I don't know how to do something. I hand it to my 20-year-old and he's like, duh. No, we need that. We all need that.
Do you think that from a cost perspective? So I think there's this notion from executives that AI is going to save resource costs, right? And so when you think about from an IT perspective and you go to self-service and you start taking complexity out of coding and building these systems because now the narrative is these AIs just code themselves, right? How do you think the conversation will go eventually to say these senior engineers are going to be leaving and retiring, and I don't have the talent, but I need you to hire these people to replace these people, but these people aren't leaving soon. How do you think that goes? Because there's always pressure to not hire ahead, right? Even in the best situations. I think COVID was an exception where everybody was hiring like crazy, right? How do you think that conversation plays out over time as AI gets smarter and better? And you still need experienced people, but there may not be experienced people there.
So I would, that goes back to, yes, I mean, I think you've got to have that cross train element. The way that I'm looking at it right now, and I think we've talked about it, is instead of saying I can remove a head, I have more capacity to do more stuff.
Mm,
Right? Because now all of a sudden, our developers are not having to do certain tasks. So then they can pivot on things that are more important, right? And then I think, it just goes back to looking at, okay, now that you are leveraging AI within, IT and some of the things that we do, you got to take a look at the skill set that you have. Do we need to reskill some of the folks that we have, right? Because we're leveraging these new technologies. Or do we need to go and get that skill set that is new and we don't have anybody that knows how to do it? Like, so for instance, a prompt engineer, we had to hire one because we didn't have anybody that knew how to do that.
I'm wondering, you've really spent your career proving that IT can be a business partner and a transformation partner and proving it. As you're looking ahead and looking at that partnership with the business, how do you see that continual IT leader evolution changing over the next 5 to 10 years?
I think it just, again, we shift from, IT operator, cost manager, gatekeeper to really being more of a technology strategist and being somebody who's, forging and leading innovation, teams and things like that, where they're trying to be 5 steps ahead of the business, right? And they're going in there experimenting, they're failing fast, right? And then, so I think the role comes more like that. I do think one of the things that I learned from, I think it was Andy Karabutis at Dell. She spun up an innovation team, and that's all they did was try to go figure out how can we be ahead of the business and enable the business and give them something they never even thought that they could do. And I thought that was really smart because a lot of leaders don't want to invest in that, right? Because it's pure overhead, it's cost, right? And so I thought that was brilliant, actually. And I think we should do more of that.
I love that. And I had not heard that for a long time about, yeah, how do we have an innovation lab? But you're right. AI, it is all about experimentation right now. So we're doing it subconsciously in some ways. But I love actually putting a goal to that experiment. That's great.
So as you look to this new IT, how's it changing how you build your teams and how you structure your teams, or what you look for now in team members?
I think I still look for the same thing because what I look for is one, I try to hire people that complement my weaknesses, right? My weakness is their strength, right?
Yeah.
I don't try to hire a bunch of Ashleys, right? It's because that's not going to get you where you need to be, right? So you need to have a diverse. I look for folks that are naturally curious and want to embrace change. They're not afraid of it. And then folks that are very execution focused, like myself. That is the one quality that I do like to hire. That's a focus of mine.
Do you think that you'll start looking for people with more strategy background? Because that's not a traditional IT.
No, I mean, don't get me wrong. Yes, it is a different skill set that we'll be looking for. The qualities in my mind and what I look for to hire people are the same.
Same.
What's changing is the types of roles now that you need
Yeah.
versus, traditional IT.
Good. Okay. More questions, Rich?
I think we have to go into the look ahead. So, what is the most overhyped trend in your mind?
Metaverse.
Why? Why do you think the metaverse is overhyped?
It doesn't solve any business problems. It's a game.
I
You
love
don't
it.
you don't want to virtually do your job? You don't want to sit in a virtual office building with
I
virtual
do not.
people?
I really, really do not.
You don't want what is it, the hologram of your employees to jump on your
Right?
desk?
Right, right. Just watch the tick in my eye.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that'd be great. I just press a button and it's like, here you are.
What's your advice for aspiring IT leaders?
One, it is not an 8 to 5 job. I think two, you have to be okay with breaking out of the whole, this is what we thought, how we've always done it. You have to be able to change. You're going to have again, to stay relevant, you're going to have to stay on top of the technologies. And you're going to have to be okay with saying, you may not even agree with it, but say, look, this is just the way it's going. And so I can either embrace it and be relevant, or I can not, and then I don't have a job. I mean,
Key resources for learning. Where would you direct your team? Where do you go yourself to continue to learn
I
and
mean,
explore?
I rely on my network.
Yeah.
In 20 years of experience, you start to know a lot of people and you get, connected with a lot of really smart people. Why wouldn't I leverage those folks?
Hmm.
Yeah. So I'm not one, not that I don't do it, but I'm not one that likes to just sit down and read Gartner articles.
Yeah. It's the
Yeah.
stories that really get us captured and then
Right.
interested, and I think explore deeper than sometimes just the articles.
Yeah. Because you're talking to somebody who's actually living the same thing that you're living. You may have somebody that's a little bit farther ahead in, the AI journey where you can say what's worked, what hasn't worked. And, they kind of share their experiences around, here's a recommendation of what I would go focus on. Here's what I would not. And I think that to me, that's more valuable than an article because it's somebody that's actually experiencing it live.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah.
True. You
Agree.
might get a lot of calls after people listen to this about, hey, Ashley. So I hope you're prepared. Book, sinker, or podcast that has shaped your views recently?
Well, I don't remember what the podcast is. I'll have to look it up. But I just discovered it. And it's a woman. I think she calls herself the AI whisperer, I think is what she calls herself. But what I appreciate about her point of view and what she's talking about is not the AI technology, it's the human part of AI. Right. And I just find it to be a very interesting angle because I think we naturally forget about the human piece of it and we're so hyper focused on the technology.
Yeah.
And to one of your first points, it is getting everybody to change that makes or breaks a transformation,
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
AI or otherwise. So I
Right.
love that. I'll have to
Right.
check it out. Nice. That's good.
Well, thank you so much.
No.
This has been amazingly
Really
informative.
interesting. Yeah. Thank you.
And we know as you kind of go through your journey with AI, there'll be more to uncover. So we'll be talking more about AI and Ashley's journey in AI and
Yeah.
everything you'll be going through. So
Great.
appreciate it. All
Thank you
right.
for having
Thank you.
Thanks.
me. Bye.